The medical facility's air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and despair. Aziza Nkosi, her shoulders aching, completed her rounds. Kukura Public Hospital presented a daily battle, a constant struggle against dwindling supplies and overwhelming patient needs. That particular day had been exceptionally brutal. A young mother lost, a child's fever stubbornly unbroken. The nurse sighed, pushing a stray braid from her forehead. Outside, Kukura's evening hustle was in full swing. Hawkers shouted their wares. Matatas blared their horns insistently. She navigated the throng, her mind still replaying the day's heartbreaks. That's when she noticed him. An elderly gentleman huddled near the hospital gates, his clothes threadbare, a pair of dark spectacles obscuring his eyes. He held out a trembling hand, a silent plea for assistance. Her colleague Imani scoffed as she hurried past. "Don't waste your energy, Aziza. You can't rescue them all." The other nurse, ever pragmatic, ever ambitious, was already striding towards the bus stop, her heels clicking purposefully on the pavement. Aziza hesitated. Imani's point was valid, of course. She couldn't save everyone. Yet something about this man, his quiet dignity in the face of such obvious hardship, resonated with her. She approached him cautiously. "Baba, are you all right?" The gentleman didn't speak, just nodded slowly, his hand still extended. The compassionate caregiver reached into her bag, pulling out the small portion of ugali and sukuma wiki she'd saved from lunch. "Here, please accept this." He took the food, his fingers brushing hers. They were surprisingly strong. "Thank you, my child," he rasped, his voice hoarse. "Do you have a place to go?" she inquired. Concern etched on her features. He shook his head. "The streets are my dwelling." A pang went through Aziza. She thought of her tiny one-room apartment. It wasn't much, but it was secure. It was warm. "You can accompany me," she heard herself offer, the words surprising even herself. "Just for this evening. You can't remain out here." The old man looked up, a flicker of something unreadable in his unseen eyes. "You are benevolent, child. Too benevolent for this world." Meanwhile, across the city at a lavish business gala, Adebayo Okoro, COO of Zola Industries, held court. He was a man in his element, surrounded by fawning admirers, his booming laughter echoing through the opulent hall. The executive raised a glass of expensive champagne. To progress. To the future of Zola Industries. His eyes, however, held a glint of something cold, something calculating. He thought of Chief Jabari Mbatha, the company's founder, with a dismissive sneer. "The old fellow is losing his touch," the COO muttered to a confidant. "His sentimentality will be his undoing." Back at the hospital gates, Bantu Zola, Jabari's longtime personal assistant, observed from the shadows of his parked car. He'd been tasked with keeping an eye on the chief, a duty that felt increasingly uncomfortable. He saw the young nurse leading his employer away, a frown creasing his brow. This development was unexpected. Aziza's dwelling was small but clean and welcoming. She settled her guest on her worn sofa, offering him a cup of tea. He sipped it slowly, his dark eyewear still in place. The disguised billionaire seemed to absorb every detail of the room, every nuance of her voice as she bustled about, making him comfortable. He noted the worn medical textbooks piled in a corner, the small, carefully tended herb garden on her tiny balcony. He saw the fatigue in her eyes, but also the unwavering compassion. "You labor hard," he observed, his voice a little stronger now. She smiled tiredly. "It's what I do, Bubba. Someone has to." The dedicated nurse spoke of her dreams for the medical center, the frustration of seeing so much suffering, the desperate need for better resources. Her guest listened intently, asking occasional probing questions. Later, as Aziza prepared for bed, she peeked into the living room. The elderly man was asleep, or so it seemed, his breathing even. She felt a sense of peace, a quiet satisfaction. She had performed a good deed. But as soon as the door to her bedroom clicked shut, Jabari's eyes snapped open. He sat up, his movements surprisingly agile. He reached up and carefully, deliberately removed the dark prosthetic contact lenses. Beneath them, his gaze was sharp, intelligent, and piercing. He surveyed the small apartment again, a thoughtful expression on his face. The magnate pulled out a sleek, modern phone, a stark contrast to his beggar's attire, and made a quick, silent call. Then a ghost of a smile played on his lips. "The game begins," he whispered into the quiet room, his voice no longer raspy but firm and resonant. The following morning, Jabari resumed his persona as the frail, sightless beggar. Aziza found him sipping tea, his dark spectacles firmly in place. She fussed over him, offering breakfast, her natural kindness overriding any lingering questions about his sudden appearance in her life. "You possess a good heart, Aziza," her guest stated, his voice raspy once more. "A rare quality." "Everyone deserves kindness, Baba," she replied, preparing for her shift at Kokura Public Hospital. Throughout the day, the disguised billionaire engaged her in conversation. He inquired about her work, her aspirations, the challenges she confronted. He listened intently as she spoke of her frustration with the hospital's lack of resources, her dream of a clinic that could provide proper care for everyone regardless of their ability to pay. He perceived the fire in her, the quiet determination beneath her gentle exterior. He was testing her, probing her character, and he found himself impressed. Meanwhile, at the gleaming headquarters of Zola Industries, Adebayo Okoro was making strategic moves. He convened a board meeting, his voice smooth and persuasive as he painted a picture of Jabari's declining health and questionable judgment. "The chief is not himself," the COO declared, his tone conveying feigned concern. "We need strong leadership to guide Zola Industries through these uncertain times." He subtly planted seeds of doubt, suggesting that his superior's recent philanthropic ventures were draining the company's resources. Inspector Della Bacare, a man whose weary face told tales of countless unsolved cases, received an anonymous tip. It spoke of suspicious financial transactions, of funds being siphoned from Zola Industries into offshore accounts. The policeman was intrigued. Zola Industries was a corporate giant, seemingly untouchable. But the information was specific, detailed. He decided to make some discreet inquiries. Bantu Zola, Jabari's loyal assistant, found himself caught in an increasingly uncomfortable position. Okoro had approached him, offering a deal, a way to secure his family's future, to erase the debts that haunted him. All he had to do was cooperate. The subordinate wrestled with his conscience. He owed his employer everything. Yet the thought of his family, of the shame of his past mistakes, weighed heavily upon him. Okoro's pressure intensified. He needed Bantu's access, his knowledge of Jabari's affairs. "The old man is finished, Bantu," the ambitious executive hissed during a clandestine meeting. "It's time to choose a side. Your loyalty should be to your family, not to a fading relic." A knot tightened in the assistant's stomach. Back in Aziza's small apartment, her guest continued his subtle observations. He saw the nurse return from work, exhausted but still finding the energy to tend to her small herb garden. He saw her poring over medical journals, her brow furrowed in concentration. He saw a woman of substance, a woman of integrity. One evening, Aziza was preparing dinner when she overheard a fragment of a phone call. Bantu was at the door speaking in hushed tones to someone on the other end. His voice was strained, agitated. "Can't keep doing this. He suspects nothing. The old fool will never see it coming." She froze. The old fool? Was he referring to Jabari? A chill ran down her spine. The chief's assistant had always seemed so devoted. What was transpiring? Bantu ended the call abruptly as Aziza entered the room. He forced a smile, but his eyes darted nervously around. "Just a business matter," he stammered. "Nothing to be concerned about." But the young woman was worried. The words she'd overheard echoed in her mind. "The old fool will never see it coming." Something was terribly wrong. She looked at Jabari, sitting quietly on the sofa, his dark eyewear hiding his expression. Did he know? Was he truly as vulnerable as he appeared? A seed of doubt, a tiny crack in her unwavering trust began to form. The atmosphere in Aziza's apartment grew heavy. Unspoken words hung in the air, a palpable sense of unease settling over them. She found herself watching Jabari more closely, searching for any sign, any clue that he was aware of the whispers and shadows that seemed to envelop him. Inspector Bacare's investigation into Zola Industries hit a formidable obstacle. His superiors, clearly under pressure from powerful figures, ordered him to stand down. "There's nothing there, Bacare," his captain stated, his voice flat, his eyes avoiding the inspector's gaze. "Discontinue it." The policeman fumed, but his hands were tied. He knew there was something rotten at the corporation, but he lacked the evidence, the support to pursue it. Jabari, sensing Aziza's growing suspicion and the tightening net around him, decided it was time for a revelation. One evening, as she tended to her herbs on the balcony, he approached her, his usual shuffling gait replaced by a firm, steady stride. He removed his dark spectacles. The nurse gasped. The eyes that met hers were not the vacant orbs of a sightless man. They were sharp, intelligent, and filled with a weary wisdom. "Baba, your eyes—" "There is much you do not understand, Aziza," her guest revealed, his voice no longer raspy but clear and resonant. He told her everything. His true identity as Chief Jabari Mbatha, billionaire philanthropist, founder of Zola Industries. He explained his charade, his desperate search for someone trustworthy, someone with a genuine heart, to entrust with his foundation, his legacy. I needed to perceive people for who they truly are, not who they pretend to be when faced with wealth and power. She was stunned, overwhelmed. The kind, frail old man she had taken in was one of the wealthiest, most influential men in the country. Aziza didn't know what to think, what to feel. Betrayal? Awe? Confusion? As Jabari spoke, Okoro was putting the final touches on his treacherous plan. With Bantu's reluctant, coerced assistance, the COO had fabricated a mountain of evidence, forged documents, falsified accounts, carefully crafted emails, all pointing to his superior as the mastermind behind a massive embezzlement scheme. The chief's assistant, his face a mask of misery, had discovered the incriminating items, his loyalty to his employer seemingly shattered by the magnate's apparent greed. The news broke the next morning, a bombshell that rocked the nation. Chief Jabari Mbatha accused of massive fraud. Headlines screamed from newspapers. News anchors reported with grim faces. Zola Industries, a beacon of corporate success, was now mired in scandal. The evidence meticulously leaked by Okoro seemed irrefutable. Aziza watched the news reports in horrified disbelief. The man she had come to care for, the individual who had shared his dreams with her, was being portrayed as a common thief, a greedy old fellow who had betrayed the trust of his employees, his community. Bantu, interviewed by reporters, his voice choked with emotion, spoke of his shock and disappointment. "I trusted him," he lamented, tears welling in his eyes. "We all did." The young nurse watched him, a cold knot of suspicion tightening in her stomach. She remembered the hushed phone call, the nervous glances. Was this all an act? Jabari, now a fugitive in his own city, observed the unfolding drama with a grim determination. He had underestimated Okoro's ruthlessness, his cunning. He had also perhaps underestimated his assistant's weakness, his vulnerability. Aziza was torn. The case against the philanthropist was overwhelming. The entire country seemed to believe he was guilty. Yet her heart, her intuition told her otherwise. She looked at her guest, his face etched with weariness but also with a quiet resolve. Could this man who had spoken with such passion about helping others truly be capable of such deceit? She recalled Bantu's strange reaction to the news reports when they first broke, a fleeting, almost imperceptible smile that had quickly vanished. It was a tiny detail, easily missed, but it had lodged in her mind. What did it signify? Was the chief's aide truly a victim, or was he a player in this elaborate, cruel game? The weight of the world seemed to rest on her shoulders. Who could she trust? What was the truth? The weight of Jabari's secret and the public accusations pressed down on Aziza. Her small apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like the eye of a storm. Sleep offered little escape. Her dreams filled with conflicting images. Her guest's kind eyes, Okoro's predatory smile, Bantu's tormented face. Despite the mountain of evidence, the nurse couldn't shake the feeling that the philanthropist was innocent. His quiet dignity, his genuine concern for others, it didn't align with the portrait of a greedy embezzler painted by the media. She made a decision. She would assist him. Imani, ever opportunistic, saw the scandal as a chance to advance. She began to subtly align herself with the COO, offering her unwavering support during this difficult time for Zola Industries. She dropped by Okoro's office with carefully curated information, snippets of hospital gossip, anything to make herself indispensable. The chief always seemed distracted lately, she'd confide, her voice laced with false sympathy. Her superior, amused by her transparent ambition, played along, finding her a useful if minor pawn. Aziza, meanwhile, sought out Inspector Bakare. She found him at a small, dimly lit chop bar, nursing a warm beer, his face etched with frustration. She recounted her story, her suspicions about Bantu, her conviction that Jabari was being framed. The policeman listened, his initial skepticism slowly giving way to a grudging interest. Her sincerity was compelling. Bantu's reaction to the news, it wasn't right, the young woman insisted. My hands are tied officially, Bakare stated, swirling the beer in his glass. But off the record, I'm listening. Together, they began to piece together the puzzle. Aziza's observations, combined with the inspector's knowledge of Okoro's ruthless tactics, started to paint a different picture. They worked in secret, meeting in clandestine locations, poring over documents she had managed to discreetly copy from Jabari's hidden files before he'd gone into hiding. They discovered inconsistencies in the evidence against the billionaire, anomalies that hinted at a carefully constructed frame-up. The trail led them inevitably to Bantu. Aziza knew she had to confront him. She found the chief's aide at his modest home, his usually neat garden now overgrown and neglected, a reflection of his own inner turmoil. He looked older, his eyes haunted. Bantu, I know you're involved, she said, her voice firm but compassionate. Tell me the truth. He crumbled. The carefully constructed facade of the loyal, grieving assistant shattered, replaced by a torrent of guilt and fear. The tormented man confessed everything, Okoro's threats, the pressure to betray Jabari, the crushing weight of his family's financial debts that the COO had exploited. He threatened my children, Aziza, Bantu whispered, tears streaming down his face. He said he'd ruin us all. We can rectify this, Bantu, she urged. Help us expose Okoro. The assistant hesitated, torn between his fear of his tormentor and his desire for redemption. Finally, he nodded, a flicker of his old resolve returning to his eyes. Okoro is meeting his offshore banker tonight. He's finalizing the transfer of the embezzled funds. Under the cover of darkness, Aziza and Bakare, with a reluctant Bantu guiding them, staked out the discreet five-star hotel where the corrupt executive was meeting his contact. They watched as Okoro, exuding confidence, handed over a sleek black briefcase. This was it. The proof. As Okoro's contact left, the inspector moved to intercept him. But the COO, ever vigilant, spotted them. Panic flashed across his face. He shoved Bantu aside, grabbed the briefcase, and sprinted towards the hotel's service exit. The chief's aide, seeing his chance for redemption slipping away, lunged, tackling his former associate. The case flew open, scattering stacks of foreign currency and incriminating documents across the polished marble floor. Okoro, enraged, scrambled to his feet and fled into the night. Bantu, shaken but resolute, helped Aziza and Bakare gather the scattered evidence. He had made his choice. But as they sifted through the documents, the assistant's face paled. He knows, Bantu breathed, his voice filled with dread. Okoro is aware we're onto him. He'll destroy everything to keep his secrets. He's planning something. A final move. The Jabari Mbatha Foundation headquarters was ablaze with activity. Cameras flashed, journalists jostled for prime positions. Adebayo Okoro, immaculate in a tailored suit, stood at the podium, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips. He was about to announce himself as the new head of the foundation, the final act in his meticulously orchestrated takeover. Today we usher in a new era for this esteemed foundation, the COO began, his voice booming with false sincerity. An era of transparency, of accountability. Suddenly, the main doors of the auditorium burst open. Aziza Nkosi strode in, Inspector Bakare and a visibly shaken Bantu Zola flanking her. A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to the unexpected arrivals. Okoro's smirk faltered. What is the meaning of this interruption? He demanded, his voice tight with barely suppressed rage. The meaning, Mr. Okoro, the nurse stated, her voice clear and steady, is that your reign of lies is over. She stepped forward, holding a microphone Bakare had procured. Aziza spoke directly to the assembled press, to the nation watching live. She laid out her adversary's entire scheme, the frame-up, the embezzlement, the threats against Bantu's family. Her words were precise, her evidence irrefutable. Inspector Bakare then presented the contents of the recovered briefcase, the offshore account details, the signed transfer orders, the undeniable proof of Okoro's guilt. The final devastating blow came from Bantu. He stepped forward, his voice trembling but firm. Everything Aziza has said is true, the assistant declared. I was coerced. I betrayed a good man, an individual who was like a father to me. I am ashamed. He detailed Okoro's threats, his manipulations, his ruthless ambition. The room was silent save for the frantic clicking of cameras. Okoro's world collapsed. His face, moments before a mask of triumph, was now contorted with fury and disbelief. He lunged towards Aziza, a wild animal cornered, but Bakare's officers were too quick. They apprehended him, the satisfying click of handcuffs echoing through the auditorium. His empire of deceit had crumbled. As the disgraced executive was led away, a familiar figure emerged from the wings. Chief Jabari Mbatha, no longer the frail beggar, but the commanding presence he truly was, walked onto the stage. A collective gasp swept through the room. "It seems," the philanthropist observed, a wry smile on his face, "that reports of my demise were greatly exaggerated." He then revealed the final twist. The entire scandal, the accusations of fraud, even his own apparent vulnerability, had been a carefully orchestrated test. A test of loyalty, of integrity, of compassion. I needed to find someone worthy of leading this foundation. Someone who valued people over profit. Someone with a true heart. His gaze fell upon Aziza. "That person," he announced, his voice ringing with conviction, "is Aziza Nkosi." The room erupted in applause. The young woman, stunned but resolute, accepted the appointment. She spoke of her vision for the foundation, her commitment to improving healthcare, to giving a voice to the voiceless. Her journey from a struggling nurse to the head of a major philanthropic organization was complete, not through luck, but through courage and an unwavering moral compass. Imani, watching from the back of the room, felt a flush of shame. Her ambition had blinded her. She quietly slipped away, her dreams of advancement shattered. In the aftermath, Bantu Zola faced the consequences of his actions. He was sentenced to community service, a chance to atone for his betrayal. He found himself working at Kukura Public Hospital, side by side with the nurses, experiencing firsthand the challenges Aziza had spoken of. It was a humbling experience, but one that offered a path to redemption. The new foundation head, now a powerful force for good, never forgot her roots. She poured its resources into Kukura Public Hospital, transforming it into a state-of-the-art facility. She championed healthcare reform, her voice carrying weight and authority. Chief Jabari Mbatha, his mission accomplished, once again donned his dark glasses. He often visited the revitalized medical center, an anonymous observer watching Aziza work. He saw the hope in the eyes of the patients, the dedication of the staff. He smiled, a genuine, contented smile. He was sightless, yes, but he perceived more clearly than most. He had found someone truly worthy, and in doing so had secured a legacy not of wealth, but of enduring compassion.